think, David, it would be worth you talking a little bit more. I've heard you in other venues talk about this concept of when you isolate data, you have an analogy of like chopping off the limb, but the concept of once we have these forks, there's increased cost, but there's also problems with data quality, which is the correct version of data that you want to use.
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, I think of it as, the tools that are used today from the outside of the presentation layer, from outside of the file system. When you copy, it's very much like creating Frankenstein's monster. You're literally cutting limbs off of a live being, shipping them around and grafting them in somewhere else to work on them, and then cutting them off and sending them back. So this store, copy, and merge model is fundamentally, making Frankenstein's monster. Ultimately, you have arms growing out your ears because you can never trust that you've merged it correctly. So you end up keeping every single copy that you've made as you do things. And it's even worse if this is between organizational boundaries or between whole companies, right? And all of this leads to just massive proliferation of old and dead copies of data with an uneasiness about where is my data? And the irony here is that, when we set out to build Hammerspace, and I talked about it as abstracting data from the underlying storage so that you can have continuous access to it even while it moves across the infrastructure. I thought, okay, we're abstracting data. That makes data more abstract, but it actually is the exact opposite. It makes data more concrete because now you can think about, this is my data, and my data exists independent of any point of infrastructure that might hold it from one point in time to the next. So it's actually about introducing abstraction layer so that we can get more concrete about the concept of what is my data, and in particular about what is my curated data, which has been highly, festered over to make sure that it is my golden copy. And you don't have to make any other copies at that point. You have snapshots. You can have snapshots that articulate the timeline where it's frozen in time, but you're not having to do copies as a tool to position data on different infrastructure elsewhere. That happens behind the scenes in orchestration.
I just want to jump in on that. I mean, we've done multiple studies where we've looked into this, and one of the most transformational things organizations can do, or IT organizations can do for the business as a whole that impacts revenue, everything else, is get the right data to the right people as fast as humanly possible. I mean, if you just boil it down to that, and the word right is very important in that statement. You can get data to the right people, but if it's not the right data, then essentially what you're doing though is you're slowing down time, you're slowing down operations, you're slowing down time to revenue, you're delaying initiatives, all adding risk to the business. So the ability to understand that it's the right data is insanely valuable.
And then this also goes to the cost aspect, and we shouldn't forget that if the model is store, copy, and merge, and has a tendency to induce you to keep around old copies because you're not sure about what is golden or not, and you need those copies on different sites, this ends up being a very big cost issue. As soon as you can have a single global namespace and maintain a golden copy that can be in close proximity to everywhere that needs it, so you can consume it with high performance, but it's the same piece of data. Now you can reduce those copies, get rid of cost. So that's a key thing. But all of this is, as you were hinting at, Molly, this is really about the nullification of data gravity. And the concept of data gravity is what's behind all of these evils, is the fact that data is massive and applications get captive in orbit around it and its storage system. And here we're talking about the need for many different applications in different clouds. It's fighting that data gravity problem. Maybe you're having to suck data over the network through a straw and it's slowing down those applications. It's funny, the further out in the orbit you go, the slower it takes. Every orbital period goes up. So you can't, so we have this concept of data gravity, and that's what data orchestration can appear to violate the laws of physics, because what it's doing is that it's allowing data to be positioned potentially in multiple places at the same time. It's allowing it to move granularly, proactively with policy-based push, as well as reactively with pull model. So now you can use those applications in different sites with data sets that are now local, even though it's the same data. It's not a forked copy of the data because it's got the same metadata plane that unifies it all.
So Scott, and do you think about the complexities of moving data? I mean, David covered some of the technology capabilities and the benefits of the data set. Could you cover from your research a little bit more of the detail, what kind of complexities you've been seeing in moving data?
Yeah, absolutely. I think about this a lot, and I think at a high level, outside of maybe cybersecurity, the challenge of distributed data is probably the biggest problem in IT right now. If we kind of think about it that way. And cybersecurity and distributed data are actually related. So those aren't mutually exclusive challenges. But at one of the biggest problems for businesses, or really, especially digital businesses, is how do you continue to keep up the pace of operations at scale? Well, one of the main factors that inhibits that is as you scale, data gets more distributed. And how do you understand where's the right data? Where is it going? So for example, in our research, 81% of organizations say, look, we face challenges with application and data portability across locations. That includes data centers, clouds, edge, everywhere. But what's really fascinating is, the Enterprise Strategy Group has been around for 20 plus years. And we started, our history was actually originally, we were called the Enterprise Storage Group because that's what we focused on. So we've been doing research on the challenges of data storage going back multiple decades. Early on, up until just recently, the biggest challenges in storage always had to do something with the cost of infrastructure, keeping up with the growth rate of data, how do we protect it, those sorts of things. Recently, those are still high, but the top challenges of data or of storage environments all have to do with data movement. How do I migrate to the right place? How do I find out where the right data is? Those have surpassed those traditional challenges of infrastructure. So right now, again, this is a real problem. It's a tangible problem. And going back to my right data at the right time to the right person concept, we know that there's a tangible difference in business outcomes between the companies that are good at this, that are moving things well, or can get the right data to the right person more quickly, versus companies that fail at that. So essentially, if you want to, as an IT organization or a cloud operations person, if you want to be that hero for your business, one of the best ways you can do that is improving this data mobility aspect. Because at the end of the day, we already talked about it, right? It's very difficult for organizations to come in from an architectural standpoint and just know, oh, I know the perfect place for my data to reside for its life cycle. That's ridiculous. Nobody knows that. So the only way to really address it is to simplify that movement problem.